presents Adventures in Online Education.
Hello, friends. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. I want to welcome new listeners. I am so glad that you're here. New and returning listeners, if you haven't before, you're going to want to head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter from me to you with an episode-related thought or two to inspire and encourage you. Okay. Let's get to today's episode. My guest today is Shawn Bundy. Shawn has been teaching science and coaching high school soccer and chess for nearly 20 years. Shawn has spent the last 10 years teaching high school science at Oregon Charter Academy and coaching girls soccer at a variety of Portland area high schools. He enjoys helping young adults to experiment in the classroom and on the field and believes that the best way for students to learn is when they feel safe enough to make their own decisions and mistakes. Today, he's going to help us see our teaching role through new eyes. Shawn helps us understand that we're actually coaches and that our role morphs over time as well. You're going to love this conversation. So, you ready? Let's learn something new. Welcome to the podcast, Shawn Bundy. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I am so excited to speak with you. I feel like I have a lot of English teachers on the podcast or humanities teachers and obviously special ed folks because that's my jam, but you are a high school science teacher. I'm so curious about your teaching origin story. How did you get into it? How did you get into high school science specifically too?
Yeah, actually, I went to a really hard college and played soccer there, and was a freshman first semester. I was a starting goalkeeper, and was like, "What?" We were registering for second semester classes, and I asked one of the team captains, "What do you recommend?" And he was like, "Well, I really recommend taking the Intro to Education class." And I was like, "Really?" My parents and grandparents were teachers, and I had never really thought of teaching, but I gave it a whirl. So second semester, sophomore year, and I got to go be in a second grade classroom where it was a split classroom. So the older kids were teaching the younger kids. They were designing the whole classroom. It was amazing what those kids could do. And I was like, gosh, if you can do this with first and second graders, like what can you do with like middle schoolers? It was a really cool experience. So that was when I was like 19 years old. And then I wanted to do fisheries stuff. I got really interested in stream and river stuff. So that's what brought me to Oregon, was stream and river grad school. And I knew I would teach at some point after that. So in my early 20s, I came out here for stream and river ecology, and then found out that if you do get a master's in that you're kind of stuck in a cubicle designing studies or not out in the actual woods. And I was like, well, I don't do that. So I got my ed license a little earlier than I thought. I thought I would spend some time in the fisheries world for a while, but I ended up getting my ed license early in the 2000s, and I've been teaching and coaching and loving it ever since.
That is really neat. I like that it started with your interest and your passion first and then morphed into something else. And we're really glad that was teaching because you're having such a positive impact on kids, especially at the high school level. That's really important. And it's interesting to see the work you do, and how it was inspired by observing first and second graders is pretty fun as well. Awesome. Well, we know you're a high school science teacher. You're at Oregon Charter Academy. You're fully online and also synchronous. So meaning that kids are following your curriculum in real time. You're trying to keep everyone on some kind of pace. That can be a really big challenge and also really rewarding. What is it that you like about teaching online? What keeps you coming back day to day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I really have always enjoyed working with non-traditional students. I was somebody who was pretty odd in high school and did my own thing. I was a vegetarian in Minnesota, which was very strange. I was in chess club and football at the same time, which was very strange. And so, yeah, I think non-traditional students, my friend group was a bunch of sort of misfits. And I really enjoyed sort of that culture in my high school. And I really enjoy finding places where I can help non-traditional students to succeed and do well. And I think that this is, when I got into it 10 years ago, was very non-traditional. And now it's, with COVID, almost a little more mainstream, right? Like everybody's done
Mm-hmm.
online school in some capacity now. But figuring out how to do online school well, definitely the hard part, right? Like figuring out how to do the
Yes.
synchronous and to actually sort of work together to problem solve is the tricky part. So I've really enjoyed working with a lot of non-traditional students. I've taught far more geniuses than I ever would have taught in Orca. And I've also taught far more kids that like really struggled in regular school and needed something different. And so it's really interesting. I get to learn from these kids that are, I've met some kids that are the size of, come up to my belly button and have been teaching me physics all year. And then I meet them at at an in-person event, and I'm like, oh, you're the really, oh, okay. And I've also, worked with kids on all ends of the spectrum, and I really enjoy the challenge of personalizing my classes and learning too, right? The biggest part about teaching is that I get to learn too. And so I feel like I get to do that here because there's so many people from different avenues and different walks of life.
Yeah, there really are. When you are physically in a space in a brick and mortar district, you have the people and the families and their children who are in that physical space as well with you. And there's variety there, of course. But when you open yourself up to teaching kids across the state, in a state as large as Oregon as well, and as diverse as Oregon can be, there are going to be a lot of what you call non traditional students. And I really like that. That speaks to me personally as well. I don't think I was maybe quite as internally diverse as you were. I liked ultimate frisbee and academic decathlon. And I don't know that maybe those are a surprising combo as chess and soccer or football. But yeah, kids are unique and kids are different and they have a variety of interests. And sometimes I think online it's easier to see that variety as well. And it's easier to welcome that variety or be comfortable not having to pigeonhole yourself into a certain identity. It's always interesting to see what aspect of a student's personality they do share with us online. Sometimes we get the curated material first and then the real deal. And other times students feel safe behind the screen and really just open up and reveal their true colors because it feels safer to do so in an online school. Knowing that great variety of kids with whom you've worked and are currently working, what are some of your strategies for meeting the needs of such a wide range of students in a single class or in a single course? Do you have a go-to system you use or resources that you lean on regularly?
Yeah, I mean, getting to know different kids and figure out more about them is obviously key in any sort of educational environment. So, just learning about what they like to do, what their interests are, what their favorite games are. We have a lot of gamers and a lot of kids who are experts in certain things. So, just getting to know a little bit more about them and what their interests are help. It's not too different than a normal school in terms of that. I'd say it's a little bit more tricky with the pandemic because they aren't getting maybe as many outside resources as they were before, and we're not as novel as we used to be. So it's a little bit different in that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were very novel as an online school and people weren't familiar with that. And so building that rapport and communication was something new. And now a lot of people are communicating with their grandparents or with their friends or with people in these sort of platforms. And so it does make it a little bit trickier to sort of build that special online community. And so yeah, that's something that really trying to figure out how to do that with extracurriculars and with asking, students to share more about themselves or share their projects so their classmates can see it. Anything that sort of builds that community is really where we want to go.
I think having them share and having them explore one another's personalities and interests and hobbies is really can be very powerful. It really allows you to see the person on the screen and not just the name bubble or the black square that sometimes is there. So connecting with them is really important. Are there things you do in live class or in your curriculum to speak to the interests or just kind of connect with students specifically?
Definitely. Giving them choice projects is huge. Having them really sort of select. For environmental science this semester, we had three options. One was a research project on a water related career. So they were researching a career that they might be interested in, whether it was marine biology or scuba diving or being a fisherman or anything related to water. And the other two were out in the field. One was picking aquatic invertebrates out of a stream and identifying them, and one was doing a local cleanup of a park or common space. So those are really different activities and really providing students with different choices, and then a chance to share those with their classmates of what they did and what they accomplished. So they not only turning it in for a grade, but they're turning it in to show off, hey, this is what I did and this is what I accomplished. And I feel like that really provides another level of stimulation for students to do work, right? If they're getting to share it with somebody, and it's not just for the box checking, it's because they want to, sort of show off that they did this presentation, or they cleaned up this park, or they learned this. I think that those are some of the things that I think are effective for me in terms of that.
It reminds me of what you said about what makes you come back day to day to teaching online. And it's the problem solving and the novelty and the challenge of it all. And that is also, it sounds like, what you're imparting to your students. Like, here's a challenge, here's a problem, and there's tons of choice within it, but go do something, go have an impact. And something like cleaning up a local park or stream, or that's immediately impactful for students. And then they can see why they're learning the topic that they're studying or why it's impactful. And they get to see what other students in class are doing as well around the state. And that, again, that is memorable. That is something that has meaning more than just a chapter or a section out of a textbook or listening to a lecture and jotting down some notes. So that's really cool to me that you're making it so tangible for them.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun when it's done right. And it takes a lot of creative problem solving and a lot of messing up, just like I ask my students to do on a regular basis, to try some projects and go that they weren't able to do that. But at the end of the semester, when I do get a lot of students saying, when we started this, I thought this was going to be really hard. I was really I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And then it was broken down into these steps. And at the end, I had this really cool project, and they're like, that I was really proud of that. That's what makes me feel like, okay, I'm getting through to these kids and we're moving in the right direction with this whole online education thing.
Yeah. And it allows you to differentiate, I'd imagine, because there isn't one exact final product that you're looking for. And so is it easier?
Yeah, it's easier and it's also challenging. I had a student this semester who is a really, really top student, right? And she wrote me and she sent me her whole project. And I was like, it's okay. She was like, what do you mean it's okay? Every teacher tells me all my stuff is perfect. And I was like, well, for you, I'm sorry, this is just okay. For a lot of my students, this would be great. You followed all the directions. And that's kind of what you did. You just followed the directions. And she was like, well, what can I do to make it better? And I was like, well, there's this and this and this, and you could, be more creative, and the project should sort of take a life of its own as opposed to just following my instructions for somebody of your level. And then at the end, she was able to submit a project and say, hey, I submitted this. It's way better. Thank you for pushing me. And yeah, I get what you mean about, sort of it taking a life of its own now. I understand that. And so that was a real win for me. It wasn't necessarily a fun conversation at first to be like, yeah, this is just okay. Because she was pretty mad at me.
Mm-hmm.
But the end result was we were both much happier with her final product.
What a cool life lesson for that student too, that thinking of when she goes to college possibly, or when she enters the workforce, your supervisor will ask you to do something and you can do it okay, or you can do it as expected, or you can go above and beyond, and they're going to want to see her above and beyondness. So that's a really cool push.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about online teaching and the difference between remote and online and choosing it and not, and get some more of your awesome ideas about teaching high school science. Stick with us.
Sounds great.
What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales@syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. Welcome back, online educators. We're talking to Shawn Bundy, high school science teacher extraordinaire. He's got some great insight for us about connecting with students and creating curriculum and projects that are going to be able to engage a variety of students in the online setting. We also know some educators choose online teaching while others are forced into what I refer to as remote learning or teaching. The fact that you and I, Shawn, have chosen online teaching makes a big difference in just how we approach the task and also how we're supported in our work with students within our schools and organizations. We have systems set up school-wide. We have tools like Zoom for live classes, Canvas for creating and sharing course material and activities with students. I'm interested to know what tech tools and professional support you have found over the years that you need from your school to do your job really well.
Yeah. First of all, a computer with multiple monitors is obviously lots of big space where I can see everything and really coordinate everything. I got a lot going on during the day. I'll have students contacting me via text message, which comes through on the computer, and I'll have meetings and live classes with screens and work in one window and a rubric in another. So just having a lot of places to sort of separate tasks and be doing multitasking sort of throughout the day is really, really important. I had a student last year tell me I needed a new microphone, and I had no idea how much I needed a new microphone until I got a new microphone. And I listened to the before and the after, and I was like, oh, yeah, I needed a new microphone. The one they provided me was pretty awful, and I sound quite a bit better now. So that's definitely another thing that was good to learn. Asking students what works and what doesn't work has been one of the biggest tools that I've had over the years, because online school is ever evolving. And so what my students need one year might be different than another year. And so continually just asking them for feedback on what's working, what's not working. No judgment here. What worked for you, what didn't work for you. Sometimes I get more notes from one student and less notes from another student. And so I'm not necessarily going to change that. But other times I get, sort of, this is a theme where kids are asking for this. And then, okay, how can I provide that for them? So figuring out, because just knowing that we don't really know what we're doing here, right? Like, we've done education with a textbook, learned this material, regurgitated on a test for a long time, right? And as a society, like, we're pretty good at, here's the textbook, here's the test, learn this material. We've got that system down. I feel like online education is one of the reasons I love it, is because we're constantly like, well, that didn't work. What can we try? What can we try now?
Yes. Open to that change.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like, continually working with other problem solvers who are willing to sort of try new things and be like, oh, well, let's try this. And then we're like, oh, yeah, that didn't work at all. And then occasionally we're like, oh, that was really, kids love that. Let's do more of that. So those things are all super important in this sort of job that requires a lot of different skill sets. It's weird because when I first started out as a teacher in online school, and I talked to, what was my Allison Galvin, which was initially just the principal or the assistant principal. I talked to her. I got hired basically the same time she did. And I said, well, what is this job? How much am I teaching? And she was like, well, you're only teaching like a couple of times a week for a couple hours. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm a teacher. Like, how could I only be teaching a few hours a week? And then, so it was like, well, yeah, you're kind of more like a tutor. And so it went from that, where I was sort of like a tutor with here's the stuff, but it's morphed from that. It's morphed into I'm a tutor and a web designer and a curriculum creator and a cultural, sort of trying to band the team together. I'm the chess coach, and it's like, oh man, I wear so many different hats in the day that it's much different than just being a tutor or just being a teacher, where you're providing, here's the content, learn it, which is what we sort of all got trained in back 20 years ago. I feel like our society is really good at, maybe not necessarily for the best long-term interests of students, the here, learn it, regurgitate it model. And I really like that we're doing something different here.
Very much. You all are doing such good work, and it is so different from what other, even online schools are doing across the country. People are starting to see that the change needs to happen. Like you talked about, the model that we've used for decades is not effective. And we know there are better ways, but that change is slow in coming for sure. So it's really cool to see the work that you and your peers are doing, creating curriculum. Like you said, your teacher role has morphed over time, and it will continue to, I'm sure. But when you step back and say, okay, I'm not live instructing or lecturing for hours every day, then what am I doing? Well, you're creating curriculum, you're collaborating with peers, you're having one-on-ones with students and small groups with students, you're web designing, really, so there's so much other activities that are happening in the background that are there to support students and to support your development as well, which is what every teacher always wants. They want more time to collaborate. They want more time to be creative and do those things. So it's really awesome that your organization is providing you with that.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciate what you said about student feedback. Just honoring kids' experiences and your vulnerability and your openness to their feedback. Not that you're going to change everything based on every item that you receive, but just knowing that change is inevitable and there always will be a better way to do something. I've tried to move away from that idea of best practice. And I just kind of say sound
Yeah, that's
practices
nice. I
now
like
because
that.
I'm like, I know. I'm like, I know this is not bad. I know this is okay for now. When we get more information, we'll adjust and do something even better. But, last year's best practices aren't this year's best practices. So just to hear you talk about being open to that is also really refreshing.
And I will add one more thing that's really, really important that you have as an online teacher, and that's comfortable workout clothes or sometimes even pajamas, which is much different than the sort of, button down thing, you have to wear in the office or in a real school. You get to wear whatever comfortable clothes you want, and you get to, roll out of bed and get your coffee and hop down in front of your computer. There's a lot of advantages of that as well.
There really are. There are a lot of human advantages to being an online educator, to working online, that you can just still have your life a little bit, I feel. You can go have a bathroom break whenever you need it or make a cup of coffee. Yeah, it's okay.
And it allows me to be the creative, fun teacher that I am and wear all those hats and not feel like I'm going crazy. If you were asking me to do that in a cubicle, if you were telling me I had to go do this same job in an office building, and I had to drive to it and get there at 8 in the morning and leave at 5 at night, this job would be terrible.
It's a different world. I say that to people a lot because I think you're right, 110%, that it is just a different job. Working in a building versus working online fully. They're two different gigs, two different expectations for educators, two completely different roles too. So both have their pros and cons, but yeah, the comfortable clothing, I am 110% with you. My teacher wardrobe has just dwindled over the last 10 years. I think I have some shopping to do, but yeah, it's so nice.
Companies started to put out comfortable clothing. Before, I'd go to Banana Republic or something, and there'd be like 2 or 3 options of like comfortable, decent looking clothing. And then with COVID, it was like, oh, your whole store is now comfortable clothing.
Right? Thank you so much. Shawn, this has been super fun talking with you. I have one final question, which I'm asking all my guests this season. And I just really feel that the teachers we become is in part because of the teachers we've had in our past. And I think teachers leave legacies of which they're unaware sometimes. And so I'm hoping to bring some awareness to all those awesome educators who influenced us growing up, just that importance of sharing stories. So who was your favorite teacher as a kid and how come?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a lot as a coach of what coaches influenced me, because you have a whole coaching philosophy, right? And I coach soccer. I've coached it up to anywhere between 8-year-olds in college. The irony of the whole thing for me is that my best coach was the 1 year that I kicked for the football team because I was a soccer player. Football players can't kick a football. Soccer players can kick a football. So they were like, hey, you do all the goal kicks. You're the goalie for the soccer team. You should come over and kick our football. And I was like, sure. So I came over and found out it was the easiest job in the world. They set the ball up in a T for you and you kick it through these uprights. It's not moving. It's just sitting there, and you get points and you're held as some sort of, really good player because you just got points for your team for doing this really easy task that in soccer is so much more difficult. But his name was Buddy Sullivan. He was the English teacher, and I never even had him as an English teacher. But I watched him take over the football team when I was a sophomore, and we were terrible. We were the worst team in the state. We were in like 3A, and there was 4 divisions. So we were 1 division below the top level. And I remember us losing. Nobody went to the games unless you wanted to just hang out and watch them lose. I remember my sophomore year, he took over the team, and they were 0-7. And the whole thing on the last game of the year was come out to this game because we're playing the other 0-7 team, and we might actually win a game. Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
They lost. They were 0-8. Losing to the other 0-7 team in the last game of the year. So that was my sophomore year. By my senior year, this was his 3rd year that he'd taken over the team. We competed with the best teams in state, and we ended up actually beating the team that won state at the 4A level. We went in their last game of the year, we went to their place, We beat them 14-12. There were thousands of people at the game. We were on the news afterwards. And the whole game, I was me on the sidelines because I was mostly with the soccer players. I'd just go kick on Friday. The whole game I was on the sidelines looking over at this game going, how are we winning? Every single one of their players is 50 pounds bigger than our guys. Every single one. Every single one of them is faster than our guys. Like, how the heck are we winning this game? And then I'd look down the sort of row of football players, and there's like 100. It's ridiculous. It's not like a soccer team. It's just helmets and guys and pads, and you're just like, guys hitting me on the head when I kick an extra point. I'm like, I didn't need that. Thanks. And it's just a different culture. And I looked down, every single one of them was like in this belief of like, we're going to win this game. And it dawned on me, it wasn't about the skill of the player. It was actually about how hard they'd work to get there. And how much belief they had in that hard work and that it was going to pay off and they were going to beat the team. Now, a lot of times it wouldn't work out. A lot of times it would, you would lose at the end, or the team that was better, 50 pounds, would eventually wear you down and you would lose. But we didn't. We actually managed to pull it off, completing a bunch of fourth down plays at the end of the game. My dad left the game. He was so nervous we were going to lose. He left the game with like 8 minutes to go. And, because he thought we were going to lose the game. And we ended up actually holding on and winning the game. It was the only team that team got beat by that year. They ended up running the whole playoffs out in 4A, and they lost to this scrubby little team that was 0-8, 2 years before that, because this coach had instilled in his players, you can do it. I believe in you. And here's the steps we're going to do to get there. And he had a ton of buy-in. And so for me, coaching has always been like, how can I instill that in my players and my students that you can get there? You might not always get the result you want. You're not always going to win those big games, but you can compete. You can do things that you didn't even know were possible if you sort of have that hard work and work together as a group, which is the really cool thing about team sports, right? You all work together as a group.
Yes. And I love that your favorite teacher is a coach who actually wasn't your academic teacher, because teaching is so much more like coaching in a lot of ways. And if we think of it through that lens, I think you approach your day-to-day a lot differently, and your interactions with kids a bit differently too. And it's clear that that's how you approach your work with your high schoolers. So thanks to Mr. Sullivan.
I've been reading some leadership books, and I've been thinking a lot about how teaching really is about leadership. And we don't really compare that. We think about teaching as like teaching the facts, but it really is about leading. It's about having that vision and having all the things we put from a CEO of a company, all the things that they're supposed to do to tie the company together, to make more profits, to get this, to get that, like all those sort of grand vision stuff. That's what we should be doing every day as a teacher. Like, how can we motivate? How can we be in care of those under us, our students, to sort of take those leaps of faith and make those mistakes and make the next step.
Yes.
So that's my new thing. Think about teachers as leaders and leadership of those people that we are in care of, not in charge of, to help them grow into the best possible.
It really is a very concrete way of thinking about the phrase student-centered. We throw that around a lot. Is your classroom a student-centered classroom or a teacher-centered? And the way you're approaching it, viewing those students as folks who you are in care of, really makes it clear that you have a student-centered approach, because you're looking at them, you're figuring out what their strengths are, what they like, and then harnessing that and moving forward and pushing them to do the best they can, to do more than they think they can. And just like a coach does. So that is really cool and really awesome to witness. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah, it's fun. Always growing and learning, right?
All the time. Thank you so much for being on the show today. If educators want to get in touch with you, or they want to learn more about how you do what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, my work email would be sbundy@oregoncharter.org, or my personal email is bundyshawn@gmail.com. Soccer questions, coaching questions, teaching questions. Always happy to answer anybody.
Awesome. That is so cool. Thanks, Shawn, so much again for your time today and for your inspiration. We appreciate it.
Loved it, Natalie. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guest today, Shawn Bundy. Shawn taught us that teachers are coaches. and that in an online environment, we can reach a variety of students in a variety of ways if we're open to being creative, engaging in collaborative work with our peers, and if we take student feedback with open minds. In the show notes, you'll find a resource from Shawn that will help you with your own project planning for students. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS education, head over to syseducation.org. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including our dream team consisting of sound engineer Natalie Farrell, graphic designer and social media and website manager Lexi Bourne, and our producer Bo Neal. Thanks for listening today, and remember, we can learn new things.